Now the Refine Edge tool actually has been added onto Roto Brush. If I widen this up a little bit, you'll see this is now called Roto Brush and Refine Edge. A few things have changed between prior versions of just Roto Brush and this new Roto Brush and Refine Edge combined effect. If you open up an older project which had Roto Brush applied, it will be converted to Roto Brush and Refine Edge. However, be careful about taking a later version of After Effects and trying to do File, Save As, CS6, because it will delete this effect from the project saved back as CS6. You won't get just the Roto Brush parameters. So this is one place where you have to be very careful about backwards compatibility. Secondly, some of these parameters have changed names between CS6 and the newer versions of After Effects. For example, what is now called the feather parameter was previously called the smooth parameter. They both imply the same thing, that you're basically blurring out or smoothing out the resulting alpha channel. The difference is that feather is a different algorithm than smooth as used by Refine Edge. So they've changed the old smooth parameter to the name of feather to better reflect what it's really doing. It's blurring the resulting alpha channel. One other change is that this parameter has been multiplied roughly by 2.7 or so compared to the old values. You'll remember that the default for smooth used to be 2, now it's 5, or in other words, close to 2.7 times its old default value. What is now called contrast is what used to be called feather. The old feather parameter didn't actually do any blurring. Instead, it kind of changed the gamma of the semi-transparent edges to your alpha channel. Feather wasn't really a good name for what it really did, so they changed it to the more accurate contrast. You'll notice too that the values have been inverted. Whereas the old so-called feather parameter used to default to 20%, well, that equals 80% contrast. 100% contrast is no quote-unquote feather at all. What used to be called choke is now called shift edge. And this parameter probably makes more sense. Those of us who have used the old matte tools, such as a simple choker, are probably more familiar with what choking means, but what it's really doing is shifting the alpha channel's edge in or out. The other change is the reduced chatter, which used to default to 50%, now defaults to 0%. Now, if you are having problems with your edges moving when they should not be moving, particularly in areas outside of where you've painted with the Refine Edge tool, definitely use reduced chatter to cut down on these noisy or jumpy areas. But be aware that that default has changed. So unfortunately, if you've memorized some of your favorite parameters for Roto Brush, you're going to need to retrain your brain as to what they mean now. However, these are now better aligned with the names of the Refine Edge parameters, as well as similar parameters in Photoshop. And in the long run, I think you'll find the new names simply make more sense.